BD webinar related to the Early Years Foundation Stage Framework changes and how they'll impact on the sector. My name is Helen Scanlon and I'm part of the Provider Development Team at NCFE. I support the teaching and delivery of the Education and Childcare T Level. I will be handing over this afternoon to the subject specialists, Stacey and Janet, for the content and delivery of today's session. We'll be using polls and the question box to allow you to participate and ask any questions. You'll find the question box in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Please be assured that no question is a silly question, and if you're not sure about something, there's a strong possibility that others may not be sure either. So we would like to take this opportunity to encourage questions from everybody. The session is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel in due course. I'll also take the opportunity to ask you to ensure that your sound settings are on mute and also to complete the short evaluation you'll be given access to as you leave today's webinar. We do value your input related to how we could improve our support and CPD offer. Okay, so we're going to start off with a poll and you'll see the question on the screen now. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low and 10 being high, how would you rate your current confidence level with the new EYFS framework? So you should see the poll on your screen now. If you just choose the most appropriate number for yourself, as I say, 1 being low, 10 being high, in relation to how confident you are with the new EYFS framework. Lovely, thank you. People are starting to vote, so really appreciate it. Thank you. We'll just leave it a few more seconds. Okay, lovely. I'm going to close the poll now. We've got 67% between 5 and 6 and 33% between 3 and 4. So we've got some lower levels today, which was what we'd expect at the start of the session. So thanks for that. Hopefully by the end of today's session, that number will be higher. So I'm now going to hand over to the subject specialists.
Good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome to this webinar, and in today's session we're going to focus on the Early Years Foundation Stage Framework changes and how this will impact the sector. I'm Stacey Mann, the Early Years and Childcare Subject Specialist here at NCFE CASH. I've worked in the sector for the last 21 years in various roles and seen a few changes in terms of framework, devising curriculums and of course advising on implementation. Today, I will be reassuring you that you have all of the tools you need already in your toolkit to ensure that this new framework seamlessly fits into your sessions. I'm also joined today by Janet King, who is our Education and Childcare Sector Manager, who will be answering questions and offering advice throughout today's session. So our aims today are to define the main changes of the EYFS Reforms 2021, to reflect on the impact that the changes will have on the sector, to share ideas and suggestions of how this might be implemented, and also we're going to take a look at the characteristics of effective teaching and learning and how they'll be used within the new Early Years Foundation Stage framework. So there are two main reasons that the EYFS framework has changed. Number one is to improve outcomes at age 5, particularly in early language and literacy. And the second is to reduce workload, such as unnecessary paperwork. So the students and the workforce can spend more time with children in their care. This is to allow the teacher and practitioner to spend more time interacting and getting to know the children, rather than time taken away assessing, gathering evidence, taking pictures, and then writing up those observations. There is a real emphasis on recording learning, not recording progress, which I find quite refreshing, as I'm hoping that that amplifies the need to interact and bond with the children. So whilst the key changes have been discrete, they do need to be recognised in order to implement them appropriately in all of the settings worked in. So these changes are that there are revisions to the early learning goals. There are still 17 early learning goals, but they're only to be used for assessment at the end of reception year and to indicate the readiness for year 1. There are changes to the assessment and moderation process for the early years foundation stage profiling, where the moderation process in the local authority will not be taking place. There's no longer a requirement to report against the exceeding level, only required to judge whether a child is meeting the level of development expected at the end of the EYFS or not yet reaching that level, which is still going to be called emerging. There's also a proposed change to the safeguarding and welfare requirements, which has been accepted, which is about promoting good oral health. We have lots of resources to support that on Cash Alumni and lots of things that you can download and use to support good oral health. There's a huge emphasis on reducing paperwork for practitioners to allow more time interacting with the children, and an aim to improve outcomes in language and literacy for all children. Communication and language has been placed centrally in the new framework, and there's a big focus on using and acquiring new vocabulary. So again, that's going to go hand in hand with the interacting with the children. So without having to gather and keep reams of proof to back up judgments, the practitioner's understanding of the child is considered sufficient evidence. So of course, child development is going to be of utmost importance, their knowledge around child development. It says in the Early Years Inspection Handbook, the EYFS educational programmes provide the curriculum framework that leaders build on to decide what they intend children to learn and develop. And that's something that students and practitioners really need to get a grasp of. Leaders and practitioners decide how to implement that curriculum so that the children make progress in the 7 areas of learning. The Early Years Inspection Handbook guidance has been updated to add clarification on the use of a provider's internal progress and assessment data on inspection. And along with that, there is clear guidance on exemptions from the learning and development requirements of the EYFS and how this will be looked at on inspection. A new section has also been added, providing clarification on providers offering a specialist early years curriculum. And it states that inspectors will be interested in the conclusions drawn and actions taken from any internal assessment information, but they will not examine or verify that information firsthand. Inspectors will, however, ask providers to explain why they have decided to collect whatever assessment data they collect, what they're drawing from that data, and how that informs their curriculum and teaching. The choice of teaching methods is a decision for providers within the confines of the EYFS, and that autonomy allows for certain pedagogical and philosophical approaches to take place. So there's a real focus on us taking some ownership over the curriculum, and the word curriculum has been something that has scared practitioners quite a lot, but really it's everything that we do with the children. It's what we want them to learn and the provisions that we're putting in place for them. The 7 areas of learning remain exactly the same. However, the early learning goals have changed, and this has been to ensure that they are clearer and easy to make judgments against. The early learning goals are to be looked at the end of reception, as I said, but it's a real stress on the end of reception, getting the children ready for year 1. Tracking and assessment may therefore feel a little bit different to what it has before. While there's no requirement to monitor and assess before the end of the reception year, most practitioners will, and most settings will continue to track the children and monitor and assess the children. Just hopefully they will make sure that it's reduced dramatically, and they now must rely more so on their own skills to track, assess and implement next steps in the moment with the children. Next steps are usually taken on the go or in the moment or in small intervention classes if that's in reception. Formative assessment is assessment to inform planning. So formative evaluation must be based on observations of children in motion, both in self-selected play and planned events in order to prepare effectively. This is at the core of successful early childhood education. Observation, assessment and planning is still very much there. There's just going to be less paperwork attached to that. This is often referred to as evaluation for learning. There is more of a focus on observing children's learning than observing children's progress, and this is something that can feel a little daunting to newly qualified staff. This is where Development Matters is a useful guide and can be there to support practitioners in decision making. It should not, however, and should never have been used as a tick list. The new Development Matters is shorter. It's about 2/3 of the length of the previous version to allow for more freedom to develop the right broad curriculum for the children that are being worked with. There are now 3 stages instead of 6 for the age bands. So it's now birth to 3, 3 and 4-year-olds and children in reception, which is probably one of the biggest changes within Development Matters. There's more room for professional judgment. You can make judgments based on your knowledge and experience instead of using the early learning goals or age bands in the framework to track children's progress. Development Matters has also been updated, actually since writing this session. So the new version came from feedback from the early adopters, and they are minor. The revised Development Matters main changes is to the introduction. The introduction now has more of an emphasis on equality, and the other changes have been to add more examples in the examples column or to take some away. So not many changes to Development Matters 2021. It's now also quite colourful because some of the feedback was that it was black and white and it was a little bit not very inspiring. So it's now nice and colourful and it's spread out a little bit better and laid out a little bit better for people to relate to and to understand. We do have the links for you within this presentation, and of course we're going to put those in a handout for you too. There is a free downloadable book, Early Years Policy into Practice by Dr. Julian Grenier, and that's also very useful. One of the key messages in the book lies around the 7 features of effective practice. And they include the best for every child, high quality care, the curriculum, what we want children to learn, the pedagogy, helping children to learn, assessment, self-regulation and executive function, and partnership with parents. All of these are so important in everyday practice and underpins everything that we do in early years. It would be worth having this poster and analysing it with students, as there are lots of key points in here that support the delivery of the EYFS. Even practitioners who have been working in the sector for a long time would benefit going through these 7 features of effective teaching and using them to update and reflect on their practice. It provides a foundation for understanding the key messages from the EYFS that are fundamental to its success. What is slightly different this year is that we have a choice of a non-statutory guidance. So we now have Birth to 5 Matters as well. Birth to 5 Matters has been developed by the Early Years Coalition, composed by 16 early years sector organisations. The members came together to create the guidance to support the sector, and the members have pulled together their expertise whilst working closely with the practitioners who actually implement the frameworks to ensure that it is fit for purpose. The guidance is comprehensive. It's very much like a textbook and can be used in conjunction with Development Matters or as standalone. It's important to remember that both Development Matters and Birth to 5 Matters are non-statutory, and each setting can ensure that their curriculum reflects their pedagogy and that the child is always at the centre of every approach. The key points from Birth to 5 Matters, as it's quite a comprehensive document, is that formative assessment is an integral part of teaching young children, and it really goes into quite a lot of depth about formative assessment. That practice starts with the child and grows in partnership. That responsive pedagogy is needed to recognise what children know, understand and can do. Children and adults construct the curriculum together, which is lovely. Observation, assessment and planning is part of a professional practice. That summative assessment involves stepping back to gain an overview of children's development and progress. That reliable summative assessment grows out of formative assessment. An informed professional decision is based on a holistic view of a child's development and learning, and that summative assessment serves several purposes that can enhance development and learning opportunities for children, including by informing improvements to provision and practice in the setting. And at this point, I would just like to draw your attention to the links that will be very supportive when delivering. What the government have done this year, different to any other, is they have lots of support and guidance on the website for each of the 7 areas of learning and development. There's your Birth to 5 Matters that is free to download, and you can also have it as a pay a fee to have it printed. The same with Development Matters. There's a YouTube video, well, there's lots of YouTube videos actually that have been done around observational checkpoints, which is something that is featured quite a lot in Development Matters. Observational checkpoints are exactly how they sound, little pit stops throughout all of the age groups to just stop and say, right, is this child developing at this rate? Are they okay? Do we need to put anything into place? And there's just a few of those observational checkpoints just to really support the teachers and practitioners in keeping the children on track and developing. And then we also have here the Early Years Inspection Handbook and the summary of changes that go with that. And Janet is just going to give you a bit of an overview of the Sustainable Development Goals as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Stacey. So Stacey mentioned there about the guidance materials, so Development Matters, but also Birth to 5 Matters. And I just want to read you something from the introduction of Birth to 5 Matters. And this is actually found on page 6, and it introduces a sort of a role and responsibility that we all have towards the Sustainable Development Goals. So here we go, and I quote from page 6. Birth to 5 Matters provides comprehensive guidance, drawing on previous guidance for the early years foundation stage, which has been updated in order to reflect recent research, to meet the needs of practitioners, to respond to current issues in society, to meet the needs of children today, and to lay a strong foundation for their futures. And what it goes on to say, the purpose of the guidance includes reaffirming core principles which recognise, and then it gives a whole list of things that one would expect to find in there, such as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and so on. And it also includes the sector's responsibilities under the United Nations Sustainability Goals and the UNESCO Education for Sustainable Development. Now, unless we actually sort of unpick what that means, what are these sustainable development goals? What do they mean? What is our role and responsibility as practitioners? We wouldn't actually have a clue, because throughout the document then it's absolutely embedded with moral and ethical sort of references throughout the documentation, but there are no clear and certainly no discrete links made to the Sustainable Development Goals. So within our sort of area, we've been looking at this and we've been thinking about this. So Sustainability Development Goals, what are they in the first instance? Well, there are 17 of them. And these are global goals designed to help us all work towards achieving a better and more sustainable future. And this was set up in 2015 with a vision to 2030. We hear a lot, don't we, in the media around sustainability. We hear a lot about climate control, environmental related issues, and what we should be driving, what we should be eating, what we should be growing, and so on. The 17 Sustainability Development Goals look beyond the environment. They try to engage with education, how can we actually provoke questions around hunger, around poverty, around the kinds of food we eat, around the kinds of ways that we engage with our natural environment. And so we've been busy developing a resource with internal specialists here at NCFE, and also with Dr. Diane Boyd of Liverpool Moors University. We also wanted to incorporate STEM-related subjects in the early years as well. So we've produced a resource, and this resource will be free at the point of access, and it will have activities, experiences, information, lots of reference materials that actually include links to Birth to 5 and development matters, as well as the early learning goals and Key Stage 1 as well. I just wanted to give you a heads up that that was coming, that this is something that we would really want to sort of be included as part of training for students, as part of the activities that we do with young children, as part of spreading the word. You know, when people think about environment and climate control, we typically think of Attenborough, we typically think of electric vehicles. We need to think about the small things. We need to think about things that can make a difference with the way that we educate young children. So look out for our resource on the Sustainability Development Goals and our upcoming webinar, which will be on the 8th of December. So very exciting, and it will all link in to provide a really good training package for early years students, for childcare students, for staff who are working with these students, and for the early years workforce to engage with children and parents and beyond. Thanks, Stacey.
Thank you so much for that, Janet. As you know, I'm very, very excited about that. Can't wait for it to launch. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. We're now going to move, well, hopefully we're going to move on. If we can move the PowerPoint, there we go. The characteristics of effective teaching and learning are described as how children learn. So when we know how children learn, we recognise their motivation for learning, allowing practitioners to develop higher quality teaching and learning experiences. This is a switch to process over product outcome, which is highly important when working with children in the early years, recognising that the attitudes about learning are formed in the early years, and that will last a lifetime. Everyone, just going to quote here from Carol Dweck, Mindset 2008, which is, everyone is born with an intense desire to learn. Infants stretch their skills daily, not just ordinary skills, but the most difficult tasks of a lifetime, like learning to walk and talk. Babies don't worry about making mistakes or humiliating themselves, they just barge forward. And what could put an end to that exuberant learning? An interesting question to ponder, really. What could put an end to this exuberant learning? When we're working with the children, there are most definitely times in the day when we have to stop the learning journey, whether that's for a nappy change, a meal time, or another part of the daily routine that the adults impose. Whilst a lot of these elements are needed, as we really do not want children walking around in soiled nappies, there are some elements that could be more flexible to allow the learning journey to continue. And this brings us back to the principles of the early years foundation stage in terms of our environment. Are we allowing the child to critically think and create their own ideas, or do we set up a challenge with an adult imposed expectation? It's important in these instances to tune in and think about how we learn from a different perspective. So consider how you learn. Have you been influenced by a higher quality learning? Was this because a certain approach was used? For example, I've never forgotten the French alphabet because it was taught in an army march. The teacher took us all around the room and we marched in unison and we all remembered the French alphabet, maybe nothing else, but the French alphabet we remembered. The combination of talking whilst moving enhanced the way that our brain received the information. And we refer to this in teaching as learning styles: visual, auditory, read, write, and kinesthetic. We consider how the students will learn best and to their potential by adapting the sessions and ensuring that there is space for all. We can and must do this in early years too, through the characteristics of effective learning and the opportunities that we provide. So a reminder that the 3 characteristics which have remained the same, there's just been a slight change in development matters about different examples, but the 3 characteristics do remain the same. So that's playing and exploring, active learning and creating, and thinking critically. It is also important to recognise when we're tuning in that these are called characteristics of teaching and learning. So not just how the children learn, but also how we teach. And that's an important message for the students to receive. So playing and exploring, just as a reminder, a refresher, and maybe brand new information for some people, is all about engagement. Are we giving the children the time to explore and revisit the experiences that we're providing? Are we engaging in conversations around what they're doing and how they're doing it? This needs to be carried out in a way that is open-ended and allow the children to think about what they're doing and having the freedom to do that in their own way. This could also take on board the children's interests and the things that fascinate them in order to motivate other areas of learning. And these really are things to consider when teaching the EYFS to somebody else, is to make sure that they really understand these characteristics of teaching and learning. Active learning, the motivation, is a hands-on approach where children are able to learn through discovery. This needs time for them to become involved and concentrate, enabling them to keep trying, enjoying the achievement of their own success. We can provide lots of open-ended resources to support this, and the time and space for children to play freely with less interruptions. An example of this would be not to tidy up every time there's a transition within the daily routine. If a child is engrossed in a building of an amazing tower, but it's lunchtime, could we provide an area that is a work in progress so they can return when they have had their lunch? And remembering to keep that there so that you have that trust of that child. And of course, it's their decision then when to put that away. Creating and thinking critically is about the children using their own ideas in play, creating and imagining. As adults, we can sometimes stifle this important characteristic with too heavily structured routines or a lack of flexibility. Dr. Dan Siegel discussed the river of well-being. So with one bank being the bank of rigidity and the other bank being the bank of chaos. And that's a great way of visualizing the way that we would like to adopt the characteristics of effective learning in the setting. Not too much structure or rigidity, and lots of flexibility, not chaos. A river of well-being to ensure that all children can grow and develop to be the best of their ability and potential. This does not mean that there is no scope for adult planned and adult led experiences. There absolutely is. There just needs to be opportunities within the experience for the children to build on their own interests and motivations, something that I'm working on at the moment as a parent with my own children. Okay, moving on slightly from creating and thinking critically, we now have a poll for you. And that poll is looking at what is metacognition. So is metacognition A, high level cognitive functioning for exam preparation, B, daily journaling about how you feel and recording such information, C, an awareness of one's own thought processes and an understanding of the patterns behind them, or D, working with others to make decisions and solve problems. And Helen is going to very kindly put that poll on the screen for you, where you can vote.
Yes, Stacey, thank you. That's polls on the screen now, so people can just choose which is their favoured option, and I'll let you know what the overall result is.
Thank you.
So thanks to those who voted already. We'll just give you a few more seconds so you can choose your preferred choice. We've got 60% so far. I'm just going to bring in a little bit of math. So obviously we've got 40% left. So just encourage everybody to choose one, please. We're still at 60%, but I'll just leave it a little bit longer just in case anybody's been distracted from the screen for a minute. So We're just asking for your favoured choice, please. Right, I'm going to close the poll now, and I'll share the results with everybody. So you probably will see there that 100% have said C. So Stacey, I'll hand it back to you.
Fantastic, thank you. So already there is some awareness of what metacognition is. The reason that we brought this into the session today is it's something that is referred to quite a lot at the moment and something that we need to be aware of in the early years. So I am just going to move on. There we go. Metacognition is much more than just thinking. It is, as Flavel explains, as knowledge concerning one's own cognitive processes or anything related to them. It is a myth that children are not able to do this or cannot begin to build the skills to do so. We can support them in metacognition by considering the characteristics of effective teaching and learning, applying them into our provision and reflecting on them with each unique child. It defines one of the many ways that each human is unique and has their own way of making sense of the world. A report by the Education Endowment Foundation says that the evidence shows that developing children's metacognition can be particularly beneficial for disadvantaged children, which is one of the aims of the EYFS changes in the first place. So the EEF reiterates this in their report on metacognition and self-regulation in stating that developing children's metacognition can be particularly beneficial for disadvantaged children, and goes on to discuss how this can be adopted in the classroom and within teaching. So in the early years, there are some ways that we can support this. Open-ended questions. So this is very much about quality interactions and being skillful in knowing when to interact and when to step back. Using questions can be an amazing tool to support children's higher order thinking skills when used effectively, and actually can work hand in hand with self-regulation too. Sustained shared thinking. So consider the times when as an adult you have an interest in something and your friends seem so engaged in what you're telling them that they ask to hear more. Remember how that feels and how you can be that person for the children. Listen intently, ask questions, be curious about their knowledge and how you can move that knowledge forward. Solution focused. We do this in our everyday practice, but by doing it with intention, it will serve a greater purpose. So for example, two children arguing over a pair of wellies that they would both like to put away. The teacher says, right, so we have two wellies and two children. How could we make this fair? And child A says, we could both have a welly each. And the teacher says, what a great idea. Well done for thinking of a solution. There are plenty of opportunities throughout the day for solution focus, and the children will be able to use their voice, creativity, and critical thinking. Process orientation. So consider how we discuss with children what they're doing and how they're doing it. Do we ask, what are you making? This question implies that there's something to be made. Maybe the child had no intention of making anything. We could reframe that conversation by saying, tell me about what you're doing, or that looks interesting. Can you explain it to me? Making sense of the world. Metacognition is a way of making sense of life experiences around us and having the time and freedom to explore the fascinations. I sat watching my own children on the park a couple of weeks ago, and I was watching some younger children who were playing, and they kept going back to their parents and putting their hands out ready for them to be sanitized. And I thought, wow, you know, they've really made sense of the last 18 months and have started doing that just of their own accord. Amazing how much they're taking in. Practice and repetition. How many times do you have to repeat something before you are an expert? Interesting question when you really think about it, as it's different for everyone and it depends on what it is. So we need to provide plenty of opportunity to revisit and repeat experiences and allow the children to navigate the way they like to engage best. Teach children about their brain, teach students about their brain. It may seem far too complicated for early years, but in fact, children learn about the brain very quickly when it's explained in appropriate ways. It's great to use animals to support this and to discuss with the children what parts of their brain help them in their daily tasks. For example, the elephant never forgets. The elephant could be a symbol of our hippocampus and how we have part of our brain that stores information for us to use again and again. Excuse me. Reflections. The children are very good at evaluating. They are very honest. Are we asking the children what they like and what they dislike, as well as asking their suggestions? For example, a child was asked, where would you like the quiet area to be? And the child said they would prefer to be inside the tent. And so they tried. It didn't work because there wasn't enough space. But what the child did learn was that it was okay to get things wrong sometimes, that they experiment and learn for next time, and that their voice has value. Imagine if more children had got involved in this and they'd have come up with a solution. I also think that it's beneficial for children to discuss the photos that they are in. They often discuss these photos and naturally reflect on what they were doing and what they could do next time. And it's often not what we think we saw. So that's quite a nice activity to do. So remember, the messages we're sending to the students need to be empowering, and that they need to still learn the fundamentals of observation, assessment and planning in order to adopt a more free flow, child-centred, in the moment approach. It's all about them. By that, we mean the pedagogy that they adopt, the connections that they make with the children and families, and the quality that they bring to the children's development. It's important to keep up to date with changes and equally to equip yourself with ideas, knowledge and a sound understanding. But ultimately, your passion and enthusiasm within the sector will work towards the outcomes for the children and for the students. Get to know the children, be curious about their interests, their motivations and schemas. Have an excellent understanding of child development. This is something that needs to be returned to again and again as the age groups that students are working with change. Quality interactions, connection really is key. Have confidence in your own pedagogy. If it works for your setting, work together in defining the ethos of that setting. The child should always be at the centre of everything that we do, and decisions on teaching, environment, provocations should be based on what we know about the children. Communication and collaboration, working as a team, including the wider community, families and other professionals. And trust yourself and your expertise, keeping your continuous professional development up to date. And that brings us very swiftly onto our final poll with Helen.
I was just going to say, Stacey, we've got a couple of questions, so I was going to suggest we do the questions and then come back to the poll, just in
Absolutely.
case what's asked. So I'll just run through what we've got. Sustainability's been an interesting point that has been made. A couple of people have asked about where they would find more information. Would that be for Janet?
Yeah, no problem.
Go on, Janet.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right.
We're keen on sustainability.
We are.
Just to say that you can get more information directly from the link in terms of what the sustainability development goals are all about. So the link that's on one of the slides, I forget which number, slide 13, I think, that's got the link to the sustainability development goals. But also we'll be sort of communicating with you information about the resource and how you can actually access that very shortly.
Lovely, thank you. And Janet, I've probably got another one for you because it's about the T Level TQ. Are there any direct links from the TQ to the 7 features of effective teaching? Would that be something that's clearly mapped across or not, you know?
Oh, in terms of the sustainability development goals, well, what we're hoping is that the resource and the way that it can be used is actually something that will absolutely cut across the occupational specialisms, and something, albeit a separate document, if you like, and a resource that can go along all early years and childcare qualifications, in fact, education per se, but the resources that we've developed in terms of activities, experiences that can be done with babies and young children, those will predominantly be something that can be used as practical activities within the classroom for the TQ, and also things that students can enjoy within their placements too. And we really hope that students will have a go and enjoy some of these activities.
Lovely, thank you. The next question is about kind of quality checking or quantifying any judgments made against own professional judgment. I know Stacey was talking earlier about making judgments based on your own professional experience, knowledge, etc. Is there anything that the professional should be aware of in relation to quality checking any of that, if Ofsted were to look for that?
I think, well, I'm going to let Stacey say something about that, but before Stacey comes in, what I will say is that I think the confidence of early years practitioners, early years educators, the staff within the workforce, there is a real opportunity here through the curriculum to absolutely think about, that early years foundation stage, to think about how the curriculum can be developed. It's about child development, it's about having confidence with child development, and really being prepared to think broadly and boldly about that new curriculum. So I would say, let's forget about assessment. I think my dog agrees. Let's forget about assessment. Let's think about child development. We've got an advocate qualification in child development, so something that can be referred to or used alongside early years and child development training. It really comes down to knowing child development, knowing the children that you work with really well, and keeping that light on for learning for children as well. In terms of inspection frameworks, I wouldn't be concerned if you know your children really well. If you've got a good understanding of child development and you use it well and you justify what you do and why you do it, the Ofsted inspector is going to be satisfied with that. They're not going to be looking for links to early learning goals. They're not going to be necessarily looking for links to birth to 5 matters or the development goals, because they're non-mandatory guidance materials, but they will be looking to see that you know each of those children and that you know why you're doing what you're doing every day to motivate, to keep that light on to learning.
Lovely, thanks, Janet. And Stacey, did you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I absolutely agree with that. It's very much about knowing the children and being able to provide a rationale as to why you're doing a particular activity, or why you've put something out in a certain place, or why you have set the environment up in a certain way. And very much about looking at those characteristics of effective teaching and learning, and following the learning journey of the child. So yeah, echo everything that Janet has just said.
Brilliant, thank you. And I've got one more question that's come in, just to remind people that there is the question box there if you have anything. If we don't get the time to do it today, we will follow it up afterwards. But is there any advice about working with industry placements for working with employers in the new EYFS?
Well, I think there always has been that sort of the benefit of collaboration, working with employers in terms of, as students, you're going to want to support your students. You're going to want to make sure that students have a good understanding of these changes, are able to receive the best possible training, and are aware of these, the changes and how they're fitting in terms of collaboration. If you can actually make some sort of network, some sort of link to industry, then I'm thinking that the benefits from that are immense, really, in terms of guest speakers, in terms of hints and tips, in terms of having somebody there to support you. So working in partnership is key to the EYFS in terms of this context, in terms of students and industry placement. Making sure that you're reaching out to as many early years settings as you can, making sure students are progressing well within those settings, and also developing that mutual sort of a benefit. How can the early years setting support with any changes as well? You know, could they talk to students? Could they provide resources? Could they help you with some of the digitalization that's going on in the early years sector as well? So I would say, yep, go for as much collaboration as you can, supporting your students the way that you are, because I know that you are with the up-to-date training and so on, but also developing those relationships that enable feedback back into the classroom.
Lovely, thank you. And Stacey, is there anything else at all from yourself?
No, just that we've got lots and lots of resources to support with this within the careers toolkit on the CASH website, and also CASH alumni. Lots and lots to draw upon and to share with employers, share with the people that you're working with, and collaborate in partnership. That's fab.
Brilliant, thanks Stacey. So I'm going to launch the second poll now. I'll just keep an eye in case any more questions do come in. We do encourage them. And it's just now a check on your confidence levels now. We've been through the session. Same again, it's 1 is low and 10 is high. How confident are you now with the new EYFS framework? And we'll just leave that open for a little while to let everybody vote. Thanks to those who voted already. We'll just keep it open a little while longer. Continuing to encourage questions. If you've got anything else at all, as I say, no questions are silly questions, so please do pop your questions in the relevant box. We've got 60% voted again, so this is wonderful. We'll just leave it open a little bit longer, give you a chance to choose your preferred number. All right, I'm going to close it now. We've got 100% at 7 to 8 now, so that's wonderful. Obviously, it's hopefully been useful for everybody. Janet or Stacey, is anything at all you want to say about your contact details? What type of contact that you're available for?
Yeah, if you have any questions following today's session, or if you have any questions about the EYFS or about anything else to do with CPD, then please just drop us an email and we'll be happy to help.
Okay, I'm just going to leave that on for the end of the webinar. So thank you to everybody for attending today, and especially to Stacey and Janet, for their expertise, insight and guidance. A quick reminder to take a minute to complete the evaluation form as you log out, and also to check the NCFA website for forthcoming webinars, resources and support for your T-level journey. I'm going to ask Janet and Stacey to say farewell before we finish.
Thank you everyone for listening. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Helen. And just to say, enjoy the freedom that this new EYFS that Stacey has so eloquently articulated. I think this is about not being bogged down with linking things to early learning goals, linking things and tracking in terms of making those links. Really enjoy the freedom. Yeah, and thank you for joining the webinar. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Lovely, thanks, Janet. I'll reinforce the freedom. We do like the word freedom at NCFE to, within a context, use the freedom of your own professional judgment and expertise to make it the best learning experience possible for everybody that you're involved with. So thanks to everybody. I'm going to say goodbye, and from everybody at NCFE, Cash, please stay safe and well. Thanks a lot now.